the lamp in front of the poets, I'd like to briefly introduce them and of course thank the Instituto Cervantes for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be here today with a new friend and a very old friend. We've had the pleasure of listening to Noni yesterday at the Jamia Millia. It was a wonderful afternoon, and I have had, of course, this privilege of knowing my friend Mamta Sagar since last nearly 20 years, and I'm so happy that there is this absolute chance, that I'm here today sharing a table with her. And I must also kind of go back a little into history to say that this is not the first time the Embassy of Spain is kind of sponsoring an event like this. I mean, I know that the Instituto Cervantes has constantly been bringing India and Spain together since its establishment, but when there was no Instituto Cervantes, there was this beautiful initiative by the Embassy of Spain way back in 97, 98, if I remember. And the title of that meeting was Meeting of Spanish and Indian Poetesses. It was, so we had Clara Janes and Menchu Gutierrez coming from Spain, and we had Savita Singh and Lakshmi Kannan and Sujata Bhatt from India, and it was a 2-day intensive workshop with the 5 poets sitting there, and just some poets like Keki Garuwala and people like me, kind of moderating the thing. And it was interesting, and I had noted at that time that in the program we had found a variety of words. So there was poetesses, there was female poetry, there was women poets, and I think from 97, 98 to today in 2012, we have traveled a long distance, because very clearly the program today clearly places them as poets and not as women poets, not as poetesses, and not as female poetry. Of course, Spain and India both have a lovely tradition, a long, historical, beautiful tradition. The word yesterday, which wouldn't have occurred to me, was given to me by our dear friend Oscar Pujol. He said parampara. We have in Hindi, this word, which I think is there in Kannada also. Yeah. In most languages this word exists, and therefore it's good to use this word parampara, that we, in both the languages or whatever language spaces, the Indian languages as well as in Spanish, it is a beautiful tradition of writing by Indian women, by women. I mean, I remember, for example, one fact that comes to my mind immediately is the fact that many of these women were actually saint poets. When we think of Santa Teresa or Sor Juana in the linguistic space of Spanish and in the Indian tradition, I mean, when I see Mamta, I immediately think of the Vachanas of Mahadevi Akka, which by the way have been beautifully translated into Spanish already. So we have this tradition. Building on this tradition, I think the women have been writing, women have been reciting poetry, and I would therefore now straight away begin by letting the poets today speak. But before I put the shama, before I put the lamp in front of the poets, a small brief introduction would be in place. I would begin by introducing our guest from abroad, Noni Benegas, who's a poet coming from Spain, but has this wonderful double legacy, because she's actually an Argentinian born in Buenos Aires in a very important year, 1947, for India. So, Noni Benegas, of course, now lives in Spain, has been working from last several years in Spain, and has this absolutely, I was amazed to see this anthology, which she's not carrying today, but she has to her credit the editing of an anthology of very recent contemporary women poets from Spain, which by itself is some kind of an event, because it has entered into a 4th edition?
Yes, 4th edition.
Which has entered into a 4th edition. Now that, I think, is something which speaks volumes itself, of course she has a background of university education. And yesterday I noticed that though she's not a teacher, she has an extremely pedagogical and didactic approach also to poetry, and that, I think, has come from her background as an anthologist, because she has an eye for making out what is it that makes this poem a woman's voice. Where is the woman's voice in it? And I think that has kind of made this anthology a big hit. I think that is the secret, that she has been able to pick up those poems which kind of bring out the women's voices so clearly, and that is why there is probably a red thread running through the entire anthology. So that apart, she has of course she's won several awards. Since the 1980s, she has been winning these awards. I think one of the most important one is the National Prize for Poetry, Miguel Hernández, from Spain. And this particular anthology, which I've already talked about, has been brought out by one of the leading publishing houses of Spain, Iberion. And she's also been active in the gay lesbian culture dynamics in Spain, and she had this series called the Gay Knowledge in the Círculo de Bellas Artes of Madrid, the Fine Arts Circle in Madrid, along with other poets. There's a lot more to say, but I will stop at that. I think her poetry itself will speak. I would then take a small while to introduce my dear friend and colleague, because she's of course a teacher at the Bangalore University, and Mamta Sagar, who was a young poet, as you can see. She's one of the contemporary voices in Indian women writing, and she writes in Kannada, but I think you also write in English.
I used to write.
Okay, but so she basically writes in Kannada, which again, of course, is a language. Yeah, only in Kannada, and it's again a language which such a rich literary tradition, I mean, of course, not just the 12th century Mahadevi, Akka Mahadevi, but even currently when you think of literature, I mean, you think of the big names, and you think of the Kannada literature. She writes, but she has a PhD in comparative literature from the University of Hyderabad, which is when we kind of met, and her thesis is in fact on gender, patriarchy and resistance, contemporary women's poetry in Kannada and Hindi, and she has covered the period 1980 to 2000. So she has that intellectual formation also, like Noni, who has been also researching and analyzing these issues apart from being poets. So that's the interesting point, of course, between the two. She has been working on, she teaches women writers in India issues on gender and issues on, I think, Dalit studies also, which is something which is so very natural, I would say, and that this natural alliance that we find between Indian feminism and Dalit writers. So she writes, she has been kind of working on Dalit literature as a teacher, and she has travelled widely now with, reading her poetry. She's, I think the first time it was out was in South Africa, and after that, Mamta has been to Cuba, she's been to Colombia, she's been to Nicaragua, so in that sense she's not new to the Hispanic space. And one thing that she has been doing recently is that she has been performing poetry in the true Indian tradition of poetry being performed, the oral tradition, and she's been working with visual artists.
One of them is here.
One of them is here, okay. One of them is here. So, but internationally, she has been able to work with the visual artists. I think with that little introduction to both our poets today, I invite you to an enticing evening of poetry by these two women here, and who will also take you to a journey into how women are writing in India and in Spain and in Latin America. And I will begin with one question. The question, in fact, is the question which Sor Juana had put way back in the 16th century. And she had said, what is the devil in my being a woman? And she said, and she said, am I by virtue of my gender condemned to eternal silence, as is intended not only for women, but for all incompetence? That was the question which Sor Juana asked, that angry voice that you can hear. And I think we can begin with that question. Do you think that women have been kind of condemned to silence, or do you think that it is only the official canonization of literature which leaves them aside, but women's voice has been there in our daily lives?
Se oye? Do you hear? Yes?
Well, the problem is the invisibility of women. And we in Spain, bueno,
Porque no
me lo
hablas
traducen.
español.
Te lo van a traducir.
Bueno,
No, I won't.
sí. Sí, pero para más.
Yeah, we will keep it like a conversation between the two poets. Yeah, and therefore I will now kind of recede, and we will have the poets' voices, and I mean they can ask each other questions, and of course the audience can come in.
Sort of dialogue. Yes. Bueno, el tema de la invisibilidad es una cuestión clásica en España, igual que en India, digamos, que es una cosa que recién con los movimientos sufragistas de liberación de la mujer en el siglo XIX, que empiezan en Inglaterra y en los países anglosajones, realmente empieza a haber un cambio en el estatuto de la mujer. De hecho, se dice que la gran revolución del siglo XX es la revolución de las mujeres, porque fue una revolución incruenta de parte de ellas. No hicieron la guerra, se la hicieron, porque festejamos este 8 de marzo el incendio de una fábrica donde trabajaban una enorme cantidad de obreras y entonces que reclamaban sus derechos. Y bueno, es esto lo que estamos festejando. O sea que esa revolución, que fue una revolución pacífica y sigue siendo como la de Gandhi, tuvo un comienzo cruento, y esta es la razón de que estemos aquí reunidas. Pero sí se puede decir que ha sido la revolución más interesante y más rica del siglo XX, porque no solo mejora las condiciones de las mujeres, sino también la de los compañeros, de los hombres, y de los hijos, y de los padres. Eso es una cosa muy importante que tienen que saber realmente, y lo estamos viendo porque hay una pacificación en la sociedad debido a que se... Sí, hay una pacificación en la sociedad debido al movimiento feminista y sus conquistas, ¿no es cierto? Entonces, la invisibilidad de las mujeres era natural en un marco en el cual el hombre es el que destaca. Por ejemplo, vamos a centrarnos en el tema de la poesía escrita por mujeres, de la literatura española. Voy a dar unas estadísticas. En el siglo XX tenemos un premio nacional de poesía y no lo gana ninguna mujer durante todo el siglo XX. 100 años. Luego, en el siglo XXI, sale mi antología a fines de los años 90, se reedita 97, 98, 2004, 2006 y ahora 2008, y hemos conseguido 4 mujeres en lo que va del siglo XXI. Entonces, eso fue por detectar las causas de la ausencia de las mujeres, la invisibilidad, y con mucha humildad decirlo en mi antología y comentar las razones, que no era un problema de calidad de la obra escrita de estas mujeres. En ningún momento eran mejores o peores, eran iguales, escribían algunas muy bien, otras bien y otras mal, igual que los hombres, pero no habían obtenido los premios. Entonces no era una cuestión de calidad. Era una cuestión de campo literario, de un pastel en el cual realmente había mucha gente que quería comer de este cake y muchas bocas, too many mouths, y poco pastel. The cake was not so big. Y entonces, una vez denunciado esto, con buenas maneras y elegantemente, como tiene que hacerse, los académicos lo comprendieron y gentilmente empezaron a cambiar las leyes del juego. Las reglas del juego hacen que ahora haya paridad de jurados en los premios nacionales. Es decir, hay tantas mujeres como hombres. ¿Por qué? Porque en las universidades españolas, en las carreras de humanidades, la mayoría son mujeres, el alumnado.
Well, Noni, that's great to listen to what's happening in Spain, I mean Spanish language, culture areas about women writing. In comparison with that, if I have to say something about the Indian women writing and Indian literary politics, Indian the prize and other things, you know, visibility of women and women writing has been there in India. It's not that it's been, it isn't there. Like in the sense, or like as you said, even in India, Indian academia and literary academia, those who do the history of literature have marginalized women writing right from the beginning. But it was the women's movement which has been so strong that there is no possibility, there is simply no space where they can now marginalize women. Women, like for example, most of the time, sometimes it's still there. Like if you see a dais, it was full of men. In a platform, in a public meeting, in a literary conference, it was always a whole lot of men. Nowadays, at least, you know, men get embarrassed. There has to be women. You know, it's not because there has to be women. Women have made spaces for themselves there. They have achieved, they have shown through their writings and like Sonia read one of the saint poets from Spanish. Like we have many saint poets, saint women poets who have spoken about the body, sexuality, being women, their anger, and they have celebrated their body, and they have celebrated being women and their sexualities. It's been there, 12th century, at least for Kannada, you know, my language, and 12th to 15th century all over India. There were many women saint poets and also men poets who spoke about women in a positive way and who said that, you have the breasts, you have a long hair, you become a woman, you have mustache, you have something else, you become a man, but the soul inside is neither a man nor a woman. No, like this is from the Vachanakaras of the 3rd century. Vachana movement is one of the very important movements. Like all the movements, social movements or political movements or the literary movements, I will not separate the literature movements in literature from the social political movements. In India, especially when it comes to poetry, you know, poetry in particular, it has always voiced what is happening. It has been resisting certain things, resisting the main oppressive culture. Like it could be, I mean, like for example, it could be the Dalit movement, or it could be the 12th century movement which was against the caste and the upper, the ruling community of the people. Or the women's movement, which again talks about various things. Like it's been changing, for example. Initially when, like in all places, when women's movement began, it was a monolith kind of a movement which fought for women in general. It was unity which was very important, not the diversity. So it was politically essential to be united. But now, to celebrate diversity is more important. Women's movement by in itself has realized that all women are not alike, at least in the Indian spaces, with the caste and the class and gender and sexualities and the color and the region and so many complexities and so many identities within one compact. If it is one woman writer, if she belongs to Kannada, she also is a woman, she also belongs to a caste, she also belongs to somebody as a wife, and she also has children who is something else. She has a community, she has a space, she has a background. Therefore, it is not just women writing. She is a poet with so many complexities. This leads to the change of the perspective. On one side, if this is happening, these are the changes that are occurring in. I would like to stick on to poetry alone today. You know, if these are the changes that are happening to women poets. Now I will not use it as poetesses or all that is gone. We are poets. You know? I mean, we are poets. We are not women poets. We are women poets when we say we are women poets. Critics are not supposed to tell us you are women poets. If we say that I am a woman poet, I am a feminist, I believe in this, this is my political stance. If a critic or a literary history says, well, you are a woman poet, you are a poetess, you are a woman, then the whole institution is marginalizing me. I would not agree with that. Yes. So, and about the prizes, you know.
The same thing for Dalit writers.
Again, there is a lot of problem. When it comes to the Dalit writing, Dalit women poets also go through various problems within the Dalit community. You know, their agendas are different, which have to be voiced. Therefore, women writing as a political stance will allow them the space to highlight their identity as Dalit women writers, who also have a different voice altogether, and that has to be noted. And like when it comes to the prizes, women's movement actually, you know, went back to history. Recently, me and Pushpamala performed on a Kannada woman writer from the 20s, Thirumalamba, who was an educationist, who wrote many novels. Her works were textbooks for Bombay and Madras presidencies. But when literary history was written, her name was left out. People thought she was dead. People didn't know that she was alive. She was forgotten completely. And she published papers. She spoke about women's issues in the 20s and spoke about the nationalist period and did a lot of work. But she was completely, erased, sort. Now she was brought back in the 80s. And this story I would like to share with people here. And when the person who was researching around her went and knocked the door, Thirumalamba opened the door and she asked Thirumalamba. She said, she's dead and gone. Thirumalamba said, she's dead and gone. And then she was brought back. So in her name, there is a very special prize which is constituted only for women writers. And this is in Bangalore. And when it comes to prizes in general, yes, we also have problems. Not much women writers have got prizes as much as men have got. Because maybe, you know, women writing began very late and it was marginalized, it was, the voices, whatever was addressed was not on the mainstream. This mainstream which makes what literature is, and these groups or whatever, every period has one political agenda which will be voiced in everywhere. Like, for example, one particular period is ruled by certain beliefs. It could be the right or the left or the center, whatever, you know. So, but nowhere women issues are considered, because the issues which are burning are not understood as women issues. Women issues are not understood as one of the issues that are burning. It's always something else, and therefore the focus goes there. But I think we need more time. I mean, it's high time that things should change.
Well, very interesting, because you know, we are kind of you know.
Well, maybe I would like to say something. We need to enter in the official history, and the national prize is the right way to enter.
Yeah.
Why we want the prizes? Not for narcissism or ego. No. Just to enter the canon. And then the young persons who go to the university or the schools can be able to know those women writing, and then that will change their lives. That's why we want visibility. We want the prizes to have the visibility, not because of the prize itself. I want to make that nuance.
And that way, actually, Indian literature, if you come to Indian literature as such, some real major voices from women have got the major prizes. Mahashweta Devi, for example, she is an amazing writer who is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, both of you have more or less kind of voiced similar trajectories, with of course great differences. The fact of the complexity of caste and region and language, etc. in India. But I think it is interesting that though Mamta, you have rightly pointed out that there is a Mahashweta Devi who has won the prize. Similarly, in the Spanish tradition also there would be one or two poets who would have got this kind of a recognition. But the fact is, for example, in India, in 1993, Dr. Arlene Zaid, she brought out an anthology called Contemporary Indian Women Poets. And she recalls in the preface that when I began collecting material for this anthology in 1988, people told her that you would not be able to put together a volume. And finally, she got about 140 women poets writing in various languages in India. And I think in 1993, my colleagues in Hyderabad, Suzy Tharu and K. Lalita, published a 2-volume Women Writing in India. And in the preface, they too remember that when we began work, we were repeatedly warned, often by reputed scholars, that we would find few significant women writers in Marathi or Kannada or Urdu literature. And I quote, they are saying, we began therefore somewhat tentatively, hopeful but uncertain. The anthology finally included again 140 authors selected from an initial list, itself selective, of over 600 writers. So, I mean, women have been writing.
Yes.
And what I would ask you therefore is that women have been writing. We understand that there is a certain apparatus which kind of marginalizes them. But what is it that characterizes the women's voice? You as an anthologist, for example.
Well, they change the point of view. Because why do the writings of women have been successful during the last decades in Spain? Because they tell the story, the other half of the story that we didn't know until then began to write. And this is very interesting because we have 2 millenniums, 2,000 years of literature written by men. And we know those stories, but we want to know what happens to the other half of the humanity. And they are telling those news stories, and it's great. That's why they are really so famous now, and you have Isabel Allende, and you have lots of, here, Anita, lots of Adenay, and everybody. Which is the mystery? ¿Dónde está el misterio? Cuentan la otra mitad de la historia que no conocíamos. Entonces, los editores, que no son tontos, dicen, bueno, pero a mí me interesa más lo que me está contando esta señora que me vuelvan a contar la guerra. It's much interesting for us to publish her because she's telling us stories that we didn't know that were like this.
Yeah, along with that, see, I've been, I mean, this is, maybe, I'm talking aloud. I'm just thinking for myself. Well, I think we should also see what makes a prize or what makes a recognition. Why recognition? What I mean, like if you have to recognize some work as something, why do you recognize that? If you ask the very basic question, probably, you know, the whole understanding of what a woman is has to change. That has not changed. Until and unless that changes, the agenda doesn't change. Like, for example, let me also bring in few. Recently, there was an incident that occurred in Karnataka. One of the actors, he was, engaged with domestic violence. His wife came out, and it became a big issue. And she complained to the police. The television showed, and the whole day it was happening. And everybody, so he's a big name. And suddenly the actors' communities, the film actors' communities, one of the senior actors said, well, all these things happen. Lots, so many people beat, women, it's okay, they also talk bad about men. This shouldn't be an issue. If such a public statement can be given in today's situation, and it's okay. This attitude of being okay is, that is not okay. And until and unless you understand that it is not okay, and not women, men should understand, people should understand, a society should understand, a language culture should understand. Only then I think the whole understanding or the expectation of what the culture wants changes. If that doesn't change, again, okays are always marginalized. That's how women writing is marginalized. It is body, it is sexuality. See, I am a non-believer. For me, there is no soul. For me, my body is the soul. See, I live because I am there because it is my body. I celebrate my body. I speak through my body. It's me because you say it is the body which is ill. I celebrate the body. It is so beautiful to be born as a woman. It's so nice. And let us, people should understand that. I'm not saying all men should dream of being born as women. Women are there not just to appreciate. They are there because they are there. Let it be as simple as that. Women, yes, they are beautiful. They are not just beautiful, they are beyond that.
Well, but we must say that Sonia was asking what were the themes of the subjects of the poetry written by women. And I must say that in Spain also, we are beautiful, but now women are able to say that a man is beautiful too. Before, we have the women were objects of the poetry of men. It was a subject, the women like the sea or the war is a topic in the poetry written by men. But now they are able to say, how beautiful is a young man who is in the subway. We read yesterday a poem.
Yeah, beautiful.
Everybody was really astonished. And they enjoy a lot, eh?
Yeah,
They want to become objects, eh? I think, men. This is something interesting because they too are beautiful. We know that we are beautiful. That's not a problem.
I think these things are coming into women writing poems as well.
But to have the freedom to say what you desire, to mention your desire, that is new. It's new.
Can I say something? If I am not in the question period, no? I would like to draw the attention to a book in Sanskrit. Actually, it's a very famous book which I translated into Hyperion, called the Chauri Surata Panchashika in Sanskrit, which means the 50 poemas del amor furtivo. And the interesting thing about this book, although it tells a lot of what you are saying, this book is about a poet, Bilhana, who is teaching a princess how to learn poetry. So a poet is teaching poetry to the princess. Now they fall in love, basically, finally, and then the poet is put to death by the king, right? So so goes the popular legend, although it's a legend that you can adapt to many different things. When he's brought to death penalty, and he ascends a stair with 50 steps. And for every step, we know also this anecdote for other authors, he's reciting one poem about the princess. The poems all begin with the same, Adhyapitam, even today I remember you. So finally the king is so touched by that he forgives the lives and they marry and they become married. Right. But the interesting thing, why I'm saying all this, is because later the princess answers to the poet. And it is the princess who is telling the masculine beauty to the poet. But, so that's a good sign, okay? We have that instance where the boomer replies to the man, and this is a 11th century word. But there is a truth in what you say, because the answer of the princess, they hardly have been printed or translated. I wanted to say hardly have been printed or translated. Anyway, sorry.
Oscar, I'm very, very grateful for this intervention, very interesting intervention, because it brings to my mind, and I'm going to take the liberty, since I have the permission, of bringing to your notice this point which you have made, that why is it so important for women today to assert their sexuality, to celebrate their body, though there is it is because of this kind of a thing that though the female gaze on the male body as an object of desire has existed, at least in India.
In Spain either.
Yeah, it has existed in India. It's very strong. Oh yes. No. And I bring to you a small story again, and that is of Muthupalani.
Muthupalani, yeah.
She has this beautiful erotic epic poem. It's an epic poem of several.
Yes.
Would you like to tell about this, Mamta?
No, you should.
The Muthupalani wrote this thing called Radhika Santwanam in Telugu. Now Radhika Santwanam, Radhika there is about a mature woman. She's about 40 odd years old, and she's, the part which I like most is that Radha is the consort of Dios Krishna, or the Lord Krishna. And so Radha in this particular poem, it's the only sort of its kind in the erotic genre. It's an epic poem in the erotic genre, and it's 18th century. And Radha is, as I said, an oldish woman, 40 plus or whatever, and it is her desire. She's giving lessons of how to make love and how to keep your husband happy to her daughter, who's going to get married to Krishna. And she realizes that she's terribly attracted to her future son-in-law. What a bold theme. So this is mature Radha.
It's a very important issue.
Yeah. No, but a very mature Radha feeling this attraction towards this young Krishna who's going to get married to his daughter. And no, the story doesn't end there. Krishna corresponds that attraction. And then there is this beautiful poem, Radhika Santwanam, means apasiguando a Radhika, calming down Radhika.
Yeah.
And he tells her, hey, don't do this, it's not done, don't you touch me, don't bring your lips close to mine. And the interesting thing is, this poem was translated, when the Telugu edition was brought out, the British government banned it.
Censored it. Yeah.
Banned it, saying that it is obscene.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I'm trying to say, that...
Well, but it's interesting.
And that was published by a woman.
Nagaratnamma.
Yeah.
Well, we have to translate that to convince Hyperion to translate.
I'm getting many letters from people asking me to do that.
You have to do the translation. Well, now we have the translator, the interpreter. So I will answer the question now. I will in español. Thank you, Paloma. Quería comentar. Quería comentar, ahora que tenemos al intérprete aquí ayudándonos y no haciendo trabajar a Paloma, que tan gentilmente se ofreció, quería comentar que no solamente las mujeres hablan de erotismo y no solamente la revolución es una revolución sexual en las letras, porque eso nos volvería a meter en un gueto. El gueto sería que la mujer sería solo cuerpo, como siempre lo ha sido, como siendo objeto de deseo del hombre, ¿no? Y en los poemas que vimos ayer en la universidad con Sonia y los alumnos, tuvimos ocasión de verificar que las poetas españolas contemporáneas están escribiendo de cosas más amplias. Había un poema extraordinario sobre la sequía en Barcelona, hecho por Esther Sarraduki, donde hablaba de ese poema, era maravilloso, y comentaba que veían en la televisión todos los días, les hablaban de la sequía, de todas estas cosas. Y luego se veían los camiones que traían el agua y la gente en la ciudad recogiendo agua, pero nadie hablaba de lo que sucedía en los márgenes de la ciudad, en las afueras de la ciudad. Y estábamos con Nuño, que Nuño nos dio su opinión y fue realmente magnífica. Había una palabra del verso de este poema que decía: es en los márgenes de la ciudad donde se amontona el sentido. No es que se acumule el sentido, se amontona. Y él dijo, claro, lo que se amontona en los bordes de la ciudad es la gente que está muriendo de sed. Y se amontona la basura porque no hay agua para limpiar las calles. Ahí está el sentido. Y esto es una poeta española contemporánea. Luego teníamos otro poema muy interesante sobre la mujer que vuelve de su trabajo a su casa, va directamente a ver qué mensajes hay en el contestador, se toma una copa, no tiene ganas de comer, se prepara algo con desgana, revisa facturas de cuentas que han llegado, y lo que está contándonos es, por primera vez en la poesía española, lo que es ser una mujer en soledad. Porque la mujer siempre está en el hogar, con los niños, con el marido, con la suegra, con todos los problemas, y no tiene la posibilidad tampoco de saber cómo es ella. Entonces esto era un tema masculino. La soledad la han cantado en el siglo XX. Tenemos a Beckett, el premio Nobel, tenemos a todos, Sartre, que lo rechazó. Todo el mundo habla de la soledad, los varones, pero las mujeres no hablaban. Y ellas están empezando a hablar también de la soledad, que es hablar ya desde otro punto de vista, como personas, ¿no? No solamente como... son cuerpos solitarios. Y eso es una gran novedad. Quería marcar esas dos posibilidades.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting, I think, you know.
Yeah, with this, I think as a connecting thing, I would like to give some references. Like generally till the 80s, almost till the 90s, you know, all collections of poetry by women had forewords by men, male poets, you know, who talked about the poetry which follows in the collection, and they said what kind of poetry it was. Like a few, if I have to give references from Kannada, some of the important poets. For one of the poets, there is one Hema Patanjali, and her collection was Shankar Mukashi Punakar, another very important writer from Kannada, writes saying that Hema's poems are the poems which has women experiences, because it has the menstruation, it has childbearing, it has etc. 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 One. And Hema also has other poems which are not referred. And Pratibha Nandakumar is another important poet from Kannada, whose collection, I think, Gokak, who got the Gyanpith, most important award in India, he writes saying that, one thing I forgot was, Gokak writes saying that, well, Pratibha is not a feminist, she's a feminine. Being a feminist is understood as arrogant. Now, feminine is, and they invent certain technically, words, jargons to describe how women should write. And there is one more collection wherein 3 young poets together brought out, for which Ramchandra Sharma, another important Kannada poet, writes saying that, well, these are the young poets who are writing, but they have to improve a little bit and write like women. And when my first collection came out, collection of poems came out, one of the critics wrote, well, this doesn't sound like a woman writing because there are no sounds of bangle in this, there are no scent of the flowers. I was not wearing bangles, or I was not wearing flowers, I was writing about various things. And even when women write about the political issues, they have written poems about Godra, they have responded to all sorts of things. All those points are not referred. They are put under, again, marginalized as women writers. So there are, who does this? Again, you know. But women have been referring to various kinds of issues around them. Not just the so-called women issues, which they are supposed to write about. By the academia or the critic community or whatever, whoever decides the prize. The prize, okay? So for women. Like nowadays, you know, women have been writing about all kinds of things. Like, for example, Du Saraswati is another important Dalit poet. And she actually writes about a news a report, you know, wherein somebody commits a suicide. And about the farmers who committed suicide because of the cotton price, you know. It's one of the fine poems she has written. And one more, I mean, they have been referring to mythologies. But when they refer to mythologies, the reference to mythologies, Indian mythologies, have been changing way through. Initially, when they refer to Sita Savitri or somebody, it was either with rage, or they would say that we are not like Sita and we are not like Savitri, or they would say we are Sita Savitri. But nowadays, you know, Sita Savitri or whoever referred is so modern. The reference is so modern. It is not the mythological thing which is expected from women writing. It is those poets who are writing. So issues are changing, subjects are changing, new things are coming in. And accordingly, I think the whole understanding of women writing should also change, and it's high time. And now, Noni, I would like to ask you. So as a poet, we have been talking about poetry in our language spaces. Can you just tell me if you have any experiences, like when I said that my first collection was understood like this? So do you have any such experiences about your writing which was seen in a different way?
You mean if I have been understood?
Misunderstood.
Misunderstood? No.
Okay.
No, realmente no. No he tenido, bueno, y si ha habido críticas malas, no las he pasado por alto. No me han interesado, realmente.
Pero más que críticas malas,
sí.
Que los críticos hayan visto un aspecto muy distinto del que tú intentabas.
No, tuve mucha suerte.
Y reducción.
No, la verdad que tuve una suerte fantástica porque en Ginebra conocí a José Ángel Valente, que fue el primero que leyó mis cosas, y en Barcelona a José María Valverde, que me hizo el prólogo del primer libro. Entonces, claro, me malcriaron y creí que todos los críticos iban a ser como estas dos grandes figuras de la literatura española que habían marchado al exilio y que tenían una experiencia mucho más grande que los que se habían quedado en España. Y a partir de ahí ya, siempre digo, mis poemas empezaron a llorar. Porque claro, la situación no era fácil en España en aquellos años, a fines de los... Yo publico, bueno, no, en mediados de los 80, todavía en el 84, recién había terminado la transición, estábamos en la movida, pero era todo alternativo, todo era... No era lo clásico lo que se movía en la superficie, era otra cosa. Y sin embargo aquí estamos, hemos hecho camino y no nos hemos dejado arredar por los críticos. Yo creo que no hay que leerlos, ya van cayendo solos.
Yeah, but with all this I would also want to say that it's not always women writing is condemned or something, otherwise I wouldn't have been here. women writing, or women, let's not call it as women writing, poets, women poets who write poetry are also celebrated. New voices are recognized by the, again, let me say, critics. Let us not corner the critics. It's the whole the group which decides what is literature, which also includes critics and includes the academia, everything. I mean, new voices within the women expressions are positively understood. There are instances like this, which otherwise, there are positive responses to writing by women and in India, and therefore, lots of women have been able to experiment within the work.
I think it's interesting to see that, lastly what we have been seeing about the kind of themes that, poets write about. And for example, Noni mentioned the fact that, it's apart from the celebration of the body, the gaze on the, on the male body, etc. There are myriad themes which women talk about, You have mentioned the whole issue of communalism, and Noni has mentioned the very beautiful poem about the solitude of woman, this new voice. So I think it is time now that we hear some of your poems, yeah? So that we hear this voice, so we hear this, what we have been talking about. So shall we begin with you?
Bueno, vamos a empezar. Voy a empezar en la página 58 y la traducción está en la 59 al inglés. Pienso que lo puedo decir en español y luego hacemos la traducción, lo dice la intérprete en inglés. Este es un poema sobre cómo vas a escribir, que creo que nos sirve a todos. Cómo es ponerse a escribir. ¿Qué pasa cuando vas a escribir? Por lo menos lo que me pasa a mí. Hablo de mí en tercera persona, Este es un libro que lo escribí así. ¿Cómo va a estar en estado de escritura todo el día? Está sentada, con una pierna recogida sobre la otra. Eso no sirve para soñar o ver. Ver como revelación solo ve en la vigilia, con los ojos cerrados, horizontal. A esa hora indefinida de la madrugada, entre la noche y el día. Todo está dispuesto entonces para el recorrido. Y aparecen, una estación tras otra, las diversas situaciones de las que fue testigo, o de las que es ahora, entendiendo lo que vio. De pie, fracasa. No sabía que estaba traduciendo simultáneamente la intérprete, así que bueno, voy a tener que hacerlo más despacio. ¿Está bien? ¿Está bien? Sí. Bueno. Tengo un poema sobre las palabras, que es una celebración de la palabra, en la página 60 y continúa en la 62, o sea, página 60. Las palabras dicen, que componen, reparan, sueldan los engarces entre hueso y hueso, los suspiros, sístole, diástole, encarrilan los pasos, remontan las huellas, llenan las sombras. Las palabras, dices, son un hilo, te conducen. Las palabras frías piden, exigen, invitan a darte calor por ellas. un batido, un aleteo, un revuelo, roces, sedas, ovación súbita o latido, ronco, güero, hondo, hasta la formación de sentido, subido, oído, transido. Su función, mantenerte vivo. Las palabras, al sol, ropa tendida, escamas, torpedos veloces del agua-espacio, proyectil de algas, flecos de sentido, desmoronamiento, polvareda, palabras bomba, hacen la ruina, la memoria.
Sonia will read the translation.
You could have the translation.
Okay. No, maybe I'll read the Kannada first.
Okay.
Before beginning, I would like to say that I have been working with the sounds of the language. Shubhro, let there not be a simultaneous translation.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I've been working with the musicality of the language. I actually dreamed to write a poem which doesn't mean anything one day. I just want to cancel all the meanings, whatever the words or the metaphors say, which holds in. Because once you use a word, whatever the meaning is given to the word only comes out. What you want to mean cannot come out. Therefore, one fine day I will write a poem which will be music. So I begin with this poem called, which doesn't have a title. It's untitled.
Page
3. I will read it in Kannada, the language which I write in. Like when I worked with different poets from different languages. Like when I did a reading, when I designed a performance in Nicaragua, my poem was translated into Cebuano, Filipino language. And me and the Cebuano poet together worked on the poem. And the audience neither knew Cebuano nor Kannada. And they were listening to us, after which the Spanish was read. And I did this with an Italian poet, and recently I did it with a Vietnamese poet, wherein what I did was, I read the Kannada first, then the Vietnamese was read, after which, because the English audience didn't know both. So when I read the English, I requested her to stress certain lines in Vietnamese. It became a music. So what poetry for me, is more to the ears, which straight away goes into the soul. No eyes, no brains, nothing. It is part of. ಹೀಗೆ ಹಾಳೆಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾಡು, ಹಚ್ಚೆ ಹೊಯ್ದ ಚಿತ್ತಾರದ ಹಾಗೆ ಹಾಡು. ಹೀಗೆ ಹಾಳೆಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾಡು, ಹಚ್ಚೆ ಹೊಯ್ದ ಚಿತ್ತಾರದ ಹಾಗೆ ಹಾಡು. ಹಾಳೆಯಿಂದೆದ್ದು ಶಬ್ದ, ಅದರ ಹಿಂದೊಂದು ಶಬ್ದ. ಶಬ್ದ ಶಬ್ದಗಳ ಸರಣಿ ಗಾಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ತೇಲಿ ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಹಾಡು. ಈಗ ಹಾಳೆಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾಡು ಶಬ್ದ, ಹಾಡು ನಿಶಬ್ದ. Like this, I think you should read it after that I read the English.
Como esto es la página, la canción. Como el diseño tatuado es la canción. Desde la página suena la palabra, suenan las palabras una tras otra, cadena de palabras sonido. Deja que flote en la brisa. Ahí está la palabra. Ahora, en la página, la canción es las palabras. Silenciosa es la canción.
Gracias. I think a few of my friends here who don't understand English, Kannada and Spanish are here. I would like to read short poems from them in English. Like this on the page, the song, like the tattooed design is the song. From the page, the word sounds, the words, one behind the other, chain of words, sound, let float in the breeze, there the song. Now, on the page, the song is the word, silent is the song. Page 8. Yeah, this particular poem has a tiny little story with it, which recently happened, which recently got knitted with the poem. So, because as the poem which I read, I also don't believe that the poem happens here on the page. It happens when a poet renders it, and every rendering is a different poem for me. So, because it is a poem for those who listen to it. The poem happens in the audience, not in the poet. And it also happens in the poet in a different way. So this particular poem, recently there was a small documentary which was made around me by a Spanish crew who came from Spain. And this was shot in a seashore, wherein this cameraman was so good that when I started talking about it, this is all about river and various things. I'll read it to you now. And the image, the way he has shot is, the entire sea seems to be in my hand. When I throw it up, the waves move. And I would, the whole image which is being caught along the poem, and well, I don't know why I said that. Let me read the poem. This also doesn't have the title. Nadiyolage Akasha Moda Thannagina Surya Nanna Bogaseyallondu Nadi Mele rachidare hani haniyagi chelluvudu nadi Akasha Moda Surya Bogase neeru kudidare Bogase neeru kudidare Kudidante nadi Akasha Moda Suryaranna Adaka yaru
Dentro del río están el cielo, la nube y el sol. En el cuenco de mis manos está el río. Si alzo mis manos, el río se derrama en gotas, dispersando cielo, nube y sol sobre mí toda. Si del cuenco de mis manos bebo del río, dentro de mí entonces el sol, la nube y el cielo. Dime, ¿quién está dentro de quién?
Sonia, you read so well. I'll read one more. And then
Bueno, a ver.
Yeah, I think we will have one more from here and one more from here.
Se lo voy a
The
dedicar
last
a
one.
Oscar.
Oh,
Cuyo aquí presente. A ver. Y hoy he hecho toda una lectura alrededor del lenguaje. Pero claro, estamos en el tema de la lengua, justamente. Es un poema que escribí de una experiencia en un aeropuerto, cuando oía a los altavoces decir en varias lenguas las puertas de salida de los aviones. Y entonces volví a mi casa y escribí este poema. Se llama Una lengua, página 36. Una lengua de pulpa de arrobo y canciones tibias al amanecer, de leguas de dendritas y confirmación de vuelo. 7:30, Concord, Portrait. Una lengua de palo para batear la lengua de diamante, del tamaño de un grenón de hielo, o la bruma de 1000 gramáticas subidas, con cantos de sílex y sintaxis fría. Una lengua de pirita para los jaspes de la escuela de Berlín, cuando 4x4 más un tamil y dicen los jades del 21, con lapislázuli spanglish y griptodontes gráciles turquoise y lusas amatistas de bahía, libando libres el son, Moon, Gate 2.
Okay. So one more from Mamta, and then I think we will dream about them.
Then I think we will read 2 more. Because
For dream to read more.
yeah. Okay, then I will read a short one, not the dream, and then another one. Okay. I wrote a series of poems called For Mother, Ammanige. It is just to break the whole conventional notion of celebrating what motherhood is. And not just that. I think nobody should explain a poem. They should just read it. I think I'll do that. ನಾನು ನನ್ನಮ್ಮನ ಹಾಗೆ ಪೀಚು ದೇಹ ಎಲುಬು ಕಾಣುವ ಕೈ ಕಣ್ಣ ಕೆಳಗೆ ಹರಡಿದ ಕಪ್ಪು ಒಳಗೆ ಹೊರೆ ಹೊರೆ ದುಃಖ ಹೊತ್ತ ಎದೆ ಭಾರ ಹೊರಲಾರದ ಚಿಂತೆ ಮನಸ್ಸಿಗೆ ಮೇಲೊಂದು ಮುಗುಳ್ನಗೆ ನಾನು ನನ್ನಮ್ಮನ ಹಾಗೆ ಥೇಟು ನನ್ನ ಕಣ್ಣೊಳಗೆ ಅವಳ ಕಣ್ಣೀರು.
Mi madre y yo. Soy exactamente como mi madre. Cuerpo delgado, dedos huesudos, círculos oscuros debajo de los ojos. Dentro, un corazón fuerte, cargado de atenciones, una mente acosada con pensamientos que no puede acarrear completamente. Y a primera vista, una suave sonrisa. Soy exactamente como mi madre. Sus lágrimas fluyen en mis ojos.
I would now don't want to leave it at this. I would like to read a loud poem. Let's brighten up. Okay. This is called Rain Again. Not say Malay. Because there is one rain already happened. This is the second poem. Okay? Excuse me. Oh, you have book 26. Yes. ನಾನು ಅವನು ಮಳೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತಿದ್ದೇವೆ ಮೈಗೆ ಮೈ ಬೆಸೆದ ಅಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ನೆನೆಯುತ್ತಾ. ನಾನು ಅವನು ಮಳೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತಿದ್ದೇವೆ ಮೈಗೆ ಮೈ ಬೆಸೆದ ಅಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ನೆನೆಯುತ್ತಾ ಅವನ ದೇಶದ ಕಾಡುಗಳನ್ನ ಆಳೆತ್ತರ ಮರಗಳು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಟೊಂಗೆ ಟೊಂಗೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಗೂಡು ಕಟ್ಟಿದ ಪ್ರೀತಿ ಮೆಲ್ಲಗೆ ಅವನ ಕರಿ ಗುಂಗುಳ ಸುರುಳಿ ಹಣೆ ಮೇಲಾಡಿ ಪಿಸುಗುಡುತ್ತೇನೆ ಮಳೆ ನಿಲ್ಲುವ ಹಾಗೆ. ಮಿಂಚು ಮಿಂಚು ಕಣ್ಣುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಜಿನುಗುತ್ತದೆ ಮೋಹ ಸುರಿಯುತ್ತದೆ ಮಳೆ. ನನ್ನ ಬಿಸಿ ಉಸಿರು ಅವನ ಮೈ ಮೇಲಾಡಿ ಅವನ ನಗು ನನ್ನ ತುಟಿ ಮೇಲೆ ಕಾಯುತ್ತದೆ ಮಳೆ. ಮಳೆ ಕಾಯುತ್ತದೆ ಹೊರಗೆ ನಾವು ಒಳಗೆ ನೆನೆಯುತ್ತೇವೆ ಮಳೆಯಾಗಿ ಅವನು ನನ್ನೊಳಗೆ ನಾನು ಮಳೆ ಅವನೊಳಗೆ ಮಳೆ ಒಳಗೆ ಹೊರಗೆ ಒಳಗೆ ಹೊರಗೆ. ಈಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮಳೆಯಾಗಿ ಸುರಿಯುತ್ತದೆ ಅವನ ನೆನಪು ಮರೆತ ಕನಸು ಮರುಕಳಿಸಿದ ಹಾಗೆ ಘಮ್ಮೆಂದು ಪ್ರೀತಿ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅವನ ಎದೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹನಿಯುತ್ತದೆ ನನ್ನ ನೆನಪು ಸುರಿಯುತ್ತದೆ ಮಳೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ.
Do you really want me to read it?
I think you should.
Yeah, it's beautiful in Kannada.
Great.
Well, we
This
should
is
leave it
music.
at that. Music, we should leave it at that.
This is music.
Yes, I think
We should leave it like this.
It's beautiful.
Okay.